Am I the jerk for dodging my niece and nephew's pool prank, leading to an unexpected chain of events that would tear my family apart? The irony of being asked to protect their assets for my sister's future benefit, given recent events, would be amusing if it weren't so tragic. My parents' home, at least, will be preserved as a final bastion of family legacy, even if the family itself lies in ruins. The most gratifying development has been the complete radio silence from my sisters and their husbands regarding the vacation house. Whether due to legal constraints or simple exhaustion, their absence has allowed the property to reclaim its intended purpose as a peaceful retreat. My wife and I have finally rediscovered the simple joy of normal life, unmarred by family drama, a peace we'd almost forgotten could exist. 10th update, 5 months later. August brought an unexpected missive from my middle brother-in-law, delivered through my attorney's office, the first breach in our wall of silence since their ill-fated break-in attempt. The letter, surprisingly devoid of our family's usual manipulative undertones, contained both a genuine apology and a series of revelations that cast our family dynamics in an entirely new light. The most shocking disclosure was the finalization of his divorce from my middle sister, a development they'd kept carefully hidden until the legal dust settled. His decision to file came immediately after our settlement agreement, the arrest serving as his personal wake-up call. The potential loss of his security clearance and career apparently provided the clarity that years of toxic family dynamics couldn't achieve. His description of the relationship between my sisters and their husbands painted a portrait of collective dysfunction, with alcohol serving as both social lubricant and emotional accelerant. His own journey toward sobriety and therapy has apparently revealed patterns he'd been too close to recognize. The physical transformation accompanying his emotional evolution was striking, weight loss and fitness replacing the bloated appearance of constant drinking. But the most staggering revelation emerged during our subsequent lunch meeting, a gathering that included my father and felt more like a debriefing than a family reunion. According to my ex-brother-in-law, my sisters have harbored a deep-seated hatred for me since before my birth, their resentment carefully concealed from the family but unleashed during their alcohol-fueled sisterly bonding sessions. Their narrative painted me as the favored child, my accomplishments attributed to parental favoritism rather than effort. The absurdity of this belief, given that we attended the same public schools, worked similar part-time jobs, and they received full college funding while I earned a scholarship, left both my father and me momentarily speechless. The revelations continued to unfold like a psychological thriller. My ex-brother-in-law warned of my sister's planned campaign to alienate our parents from my wife and me, using their children as emotional leverage. Their persistent belief in our parents' hidden wealth, and their conviction that I would somehow block their access to this imaginary fortune, would have been comical if it hadn't prompted my father's bitter laughter. He also confessed to his and my middle sister's own participation in the vacation house rental scheme, though on a smaller scale, offering to make financial amends, an offer I declined in favor of leaving the past buried. The aftermath of these revelations rippled through our family like aftershocks from an emotional earthquake. My mother's initial reaction to learning of my sister's planned manipulation was predictably tearful, but her tears quickly transformed into steely resolve. Their scheme to use the grandchildren as pawns particularly wounded her, though Dad's steady presence helped prevent an immediate confrontation. My own response to these revelations has been complex enough to warrant professional help. I've returned to therapy, finding it invaluable in processing the discovery that my sister's animosity predates my existence. My therapist supports maintaining no contact for now while encouraging an open mind about the distant future, advice that feels both wise and challenging. As I reflect on this year-long saga, I'm struck by how a simple poolside dodge became the catalyst for exposing decades of hidden resentment, financial misconduct, and family dysfunction. The vacation house, intended as a gift of love, transformed into both a battlefield and ultimately a sanctuary. Perhaps there's a certain poetry in that transformation, like the property itself. Sometimes we must weather storms to find our peace. In the end, this story isn't really about a pool incident, or even a vacation house. It's about the fragile nature of family bonds, the insidious power of long-harbored resentments, and the sometimes necessary pain of choosing peace over toxic connections. As winter blankets our mountain retreat in pristine snow, I find myself grateful for the clarity that this year of chaos has brought, even as I mourn the family relationships that couldn't survive its revelations. Posted by you/scared_weakness_6250. It all began on a sweltering summer afternoon, the kind where the air hangs heavy with humidity and unspoken family tensions. My parents, eternal optimists in their quest for family harmony, decided to host what they hoped would be a joyful backyard barbecue. I initially declined, my reluctance stemming from years of strained relationships with my two sisters and their chaotic families. However, the combined forces of my mother's relentless guilt-tripping and my wife's diplomatic reasoning eventually eroded my resistance. When we arrived at the suburban battleground, the scene was already a powder keg waiting to explode. About 20 people were scattered across the yard like chess pieces in an incomprehensible game, my sisters and their husbands having already achieved that particular state of inebriation where inhibitions dissolve and old resentments surface. My mother, playing her familiar role as the family's desperate peacekeeper, was frantically attempting to corral my nieces and nephews, ages 7 to 11, a task that seemed as futile as herding cats. Meanwhile, my father had executed a brilliant tactical retreat to his whirlpool sanctuary, armed with enough cold beers to outlast any family crisis. My wife and I navigated the social minefield with practiced caution, making the obligatory rounds of small talk while nursing our frozen margaritas like shields against the growing tension. My sisters and their spouses, already several drinks past civility, took turns launching passive-aggressive missiles about our tardiness, our inappropriate casual attire, and how we were killing the vibe, as if we'd committed some grave offense against the sacred suburban social code. The catalyst for chaos arrived 45 minutes into this forced family gathering. Two of the children, intoxicated by their parents' negligence and the heady atmosphere of unchecked mischief, zeroed in on their first victim, an unsuspecting neighbor who had made the fatal mistake of standing too close to the pool's edge. Their attempted assault resulted in a half-soaked victim who, displaying more grace than the entire situation deserved, maintained remarkable composure. She quietly gathered her dignity along with her belongings, dried herself off, and made an elegant exit that spoke volumes in its silence. My sisters and their husbands, their judgment drowning in cocktails, found this juvenile assault absolutely hilarious, their laughter a discordant soundtrack to the neighbor's retreat. The success of this first attack apparently emboldened the young troublemakers. I caught the conspiratorial glances, the poorly concealed giggles, the strategic positioning that telegraphed their next move. 3 determined little miscreants began their approach, charging toward me at full speed like tiny warriors convinced of their impending victory. Years of dealing with my sister's schemes had honed my survival instincts. With the reflexes of someone who valued both their dignity and their electronics, I executed a perfectly timed sidestep that would have made a matador proud. The result was pure poetry in motion. 3 overconfident children, their momentum carrying them past the point of no return, sailed through the air in an graceless arc before plunging headlong into the deep end. The poolside erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Most guests, including my wife, found the poetic justice of the moment deliciously entertaining. The children's failed ambush had transformed into an impromptu swimming demonstration that no one had requested. However, my sisters, their maternal instincts suddenly emerging from their alcohol-induced fog like vengeful spirits, metamorphosed into rage-fueled banshees. Their mascara-streaked faces contorted in fury as they unleashed glass-shattering shrieks upon discovering that 2 of their precious angels couldn't swim, a remarkably convenient fact that materialized only after their failed assassination attempt. Their hysteria reached new heights when they realized their darling offspring had been recording their attempted ambush on their parents' iPhones, which were now conducting an impromptu underwater exploration at the deep end. The pool deck became a theater of chaos as various players assumed their roles in this suburban tragedy. While other guests rushed to fish out the spluttering children, who seemed remarkably buoyant for non-swimmers, I maintained a strategic distance, my dry clothes a silent testimony to my successful evasion. One of my brothers-in-law, his paternal pride wounded more deeply than his offspring's dignity, attempted a heroic phone rescue mission. His considerable bulk, further handicapped by his impressive blood alcohol content, transformed this recovery attempt into a spectacle of futility. He floundered at the pool's edge like a beached whale, while his phone remained stubbornly out of reach. Unsurprisingly, no other guests volunteered to join this impromptu diving expedition. Apparently, the allure of retrieving waterlogged electronics wasn't worth ruining their summer attire. All hell broke loose in the aftermath. My sisters, their mascara running from pool water and rage, unleashed a torrent of accusations, blaming everyone in general and me in particular for nearly drowning their babies and destroying their precious iPhones. The irony of their children's premeditated assault seemed lost in their alcohol-addled minds. I stood my ground, pointing out that proper parental supervision might have prevented this aquatic fiasco entirely. The tension escalated when my other brother-in-law, attempting to join the verbal assault, demonstrated his impressive blood alcohol content by faceplanting mid-rant. My wife and I made our tactical retreat as the party devolved into chaos. Later, my sisters had the audacity to suggest I should have played the willing victim, sacrificing my phone and dignity to entertain their poorly supervised offspring. The cherry on top? My father never once emerged from his whirlpool sanctuary throughout the entire debacle. Update, 1 month later. What began as ripples in our family pool has metamorphosed into emotional tsunamis that continue to reshape our familial landscape. First, let me clear the chlorinated waters about my niece's and nephew's aquatic abilities, a truth my parents reluctantly revealed, like confessing to a long-held family secret. Contrary to my sister's Oscar-worthy performances of maternal panic, all the children are actually accomplished swimmers. Even the 7-year-old, while still perfecting his technique, navigates water with the confidence of a young dolphin. My sister's dramatic declaration of their inability to swim was nothing more than a calculated attempt to paint me as the villain in this suburban Shakespeare play, a performance that would have been more convincing if their children hadn't been doing cannonballs in the deep end all summer. The aftermath of the pool party spiraled into a comedy of errors worthy of primetime television. My face-planting brother-in-law's dramatic exit required an urgent care visit for stitches, forcing my father to abandon his beloved whirlpool sanctuary to play reluctant chauffeur, a development that soured his mood like milk left in the summer sun. That evening, my sister initiated a group text that unleashed a torrent of vitriol so colorful it would have made a sailor blush and a thesaurus proud. Their husbands, not to be outdone in this festival of fury, contributed their own creative commentary, apparently having discovered previously unknown combinations of expletives. My wife and I responded with the digital equivalent of a raised eyebrow, simply blocking all 4 of them. My mother, devastated by the toxic exchange she witnessed in the group chat, insisted on a family summit the following day, minus the children. This peace conference resulted in a grudging apology delivered through my mother's phone, their words as sincere as a politician's campaign promises. My wife's steely presence beside me helped me maintain composure as I accepted their hollow words, hoping to close this chapter. Naively believing the storm had passed, I unblocked their numbers that evening. My optimism was promptly shattered by a text from one of my brothers-in-law, demanding $1,200 for the waterlogged iPhones. The audacity was breathtaking. I took a screenshot of this brazen attempt at extortion and forwarded it to my parents, announcing our decision to sever all ties with my sisters and their spouses. Family gatherings and holidays would now be off limits if they were present. This declaration ignited an inferno. My father, finally emerging from his usual diplomatic reserve, unleashed years of pent-up frustration. He not only banned the grandchildren from their home, a devastating blow given my mother's regular babysitting duties, but also revoked their access to the family vacation house. Then came the bombshell. He revealed that my wife and I were the true owners of the property, not he and my mother. The revelation sent shockwaves through the family. Both of my sisters had been treating the vacation house as their personal resort, even hosting weekend getaways for friends. This ownership disclosure was never part of our plan. We had purchased it for our parents, keeping the arrangement quiet to avoid exactly this kind of drama with my siblings. The aftermath of this revelation was swift and desperate. Days later, my sisters and their husbands materialized on our doorstep, their faces masks of contrition, seeking an audience for their carefully rehearsed apologies. Fortune favored us. We were enjoying a peaceful dinner elsewhere, leaving them to deposit their regrets in written form. One sister even attempted to penetrate my professional sanctuary with a phone call, which I promptly redirected to voicemail's digital purgatory. After careful consideration, my wife and I have chosen the path of complete estrangement, an indefinite exile from our lives for these toxic family members. The past 3 weeks of silence have been more healing than any forced reconciliation could ever be. Personally, I've reached the point of absolute finality. They can take their manipulative tactics and pound sand. Second update, 9 days later. Just when I thought the waters had calmed, a financial tsunami crashed into our family's shore. To comprehend the magnitude of this new crisis, some context is necessary. My parents, while comfortable, have never been financial virtuosos. Having managed their taxes for years, I'm intimately familiar with their fiscal reality: a paid-off house, minimal debt, modest retirement savings, Social Security, and my father's reliable pension. I even gifted them their current vehicle upon retirement, their first non-leased car in 2 decades. My sisters, however, have constructed an elaborate fantasy about our parents' wealth, convinced they're secretly sitting on a fortune destined to be divided between them since their successful brother, that's me, doesn't need it. This delusion has fueled their own financial recklessness. The truth exploded like a financial bomb when my oldest sister, drowning in debt with 3 children in tow, confessed to our mother that they were on the brink of financial ruin. Their credit cards were maxed out, car lease payments were in arrears, and repossession loomed on the horizon. Her husband's boasted income proved to be half smoke and mirrors. But the most shocking revelation? For 3 years, they had been secretly renting out the vacation house monthly, pocketing thousands of dollars per booking, $2,000 for weekends, $4,000 for full weeks. This unauthorized rental scheme came crashing down with their banishment from the property. My sister now faced the uncomfortable task of canceling future bookings and explaining to her regular clients that their luxury mountain getaway was no longer available. My other sister's complicity in this deception became apparent. I recalled a suspicious encounter at the property where I'd discovered unknown guests claiming to be staying there with permission. The revelation hit my parents like a sledgehammer. My mother's stress was palpable, while my father's anger simmered beneath a veneer of disappointment. His sense of betrayal was compounded by his inability to financially rescue his daughter from her self-inflicted crisis. He reaffirmed his decision to ban my sisters from the vacation property, a stance that carried more weight now that their profitable side business had been exposed. My parents shared this information as a warning. They correctly anticipated that my sisters would soon launch a full-scale assault on my generosity. True to form, on Thursday, my sisters appeared at our doorstep unannounced, without their husbands this time. I faced an impossible choice: risk a public confrontation, allow them to create a scene, or invite them inside. I chose the latter, opening the door to what would become an hour of emotional warfare. Their performance was a masterclass in manipulation. My older sister, with her younger sibling providing backup vocals, spun an elaborate tale about why they desperately needed immediate access to the mountain property. The crescendo of their presentation was a stunning demand. Apparently, as the successful sibling, I was now obligated to finance their children's college education. That's what family does, they declared with breathtaking entitlement. I let them finish their carefully orchestrated performance before dropping the bomb. I knew everything about their illicit rental operation. The facade crumbled instantly, replaced by a spectacular display of emotional gymnastics, denial, tears, cursing, and screaming. The peaceful suburban afternoon was shattered by their hysteria. I admit to unleashing some particularly harsh truths in response, every word justified, but cutting nonetheless. After their dramatic exit, I sought refuge in a hot shower and collapsed into bed, emotionally drained. When I emerged, my wife greeted me with news that my sisters had spawned new phone numbers to continue their assault, forcing her to expand our growing collection of blocked contacts. Yesterday, my parents messaged requesting a call, no doubt to relay whatever version of events my sisters had concocted. But I couldn't summon the energy to rehash the confrontation. My usual vitality had been sapped by this endless family drama. Instead, I channeled my remaining energy into securing the vacation property, driving up to install an industrial-grade padlock on the entrance gate. The key to this fortress now rests solely in my possession, a physical manifestation of my sisters' exile from their former paradise. The 400-yard uphill trek to the house should prove an effective deterrent to any unauthorized visits. Let them try to breach that barrier, they'd probably expire from the effort before reaching the front door. It's a harsh measure, perhaps, but necessary given the circumstances. Sometimes the only way to protect what's yours is to build walls, both literal and metaphorical. Third update, 2.5 weeks later. The latest chapter in this family saga brings both resolution and new complications. My parents, weary of their role as mediators in the vacation home drama, have officially washed their hands of the property's management. The responsibility now falls squarely on my shoulders, a development that, while logical, carries its own bitter irony. The house was meant to be their sanctuary, a place of joy and relaxation in their golden years. Instead, it has become a symbol of family division. I've implemented a comprehensive security overhaul. The entrance now boasts a heavy-duty chain secured by the most formidable lock money can buy. All door keypads have been reset with new codes known only to me. The crowning achievement is a state-of-the-art security camera system, which, though more expensive than anticipated, offers priceless peace of mind. One particularly impressive camera provides a sweeping view of the valley below, a reminder that beauty still exists amid the chaos. The property is now festooned with signs announcing its video surveillance, and I've even installed a specialized lockout system for the water supply, a precaution whose necessity speaks volumes about the level of trust within our family. Only my wife and I possess the keys to this particular safeguard, a secret we're keeping close to our chests. Last week brought unwelcome calls from both brothers-in-law to my office, each attempting to negotiate continued access to the property. The older one's call was particularly revealing. He had attempted a guy's weekend at the house, only to find himself humiliatingly locked out at the gate. His tone oscillated wildly between aggressive threats and pathetic pleading. At one point, he even boasted about their illicit rental operation, claiming we were destroying their business and demanding we reimburse their guests. The audacity was almost admirable. The younger brother-in-law's attempt was notably half-hearted, clearly a performance mandated by my sister rather than a genuine effort. His quick capitulation when I firmly denied future access spoke volumes about his investment in this family drama. I made it crystal clear to both. The vacation house was permanently off-limits to them. The era of their entitled access had come to a definitive end. At this juncture, I'm seriously contemplating selling the property. The potential profit is tempting. I could easily double my investment. The house, perched on 3 pristine lots with breathtaking views at the end of a private road, would be a realtor's dream listing. However, I'm resisting the urge to make such a significant decision while emotions are still raw. Sometimes the best response to chaos is simply to wait. Fourth update, 1 month later. In response to several inquiries about the ongoing saga, I've enlisted professional help in managing the mountain retreat. I've hired David, a local property manager whose life story reads like a compelling novel, a former big city cop who retreated to the mountains after a traumatic on-duty shooting. His service dog, a constant companion and certified emotional support animal, accompanies him on his rounds. David's credentials extend beyond property management. His law enforcement background and close relationships with local sheriff's deputies provide an extra layer of security that proves invaluable. He monitors our camera feeds, conducts bi-weekly physical inspections, and even sends us weekly photos of wildlife and spectacular sunsets. At $450 monthly plus hourly rates for maintenance, his services offer priceless peace of mind. My parents, showing remarkable resilience, have devised an elegant solution to the looming Thanksgiving drama. Rather than cave to my sister's demands for access to the vacation house, they proposed a novel approach: either everyone contributes to renting an Airbnb in the mountains, or the celebration moves to their home. This masterstroke has already exposed the financial fault lines in our family. My older sister's inability to contribute has created tension with our middle sister, who enthusiastically supported the Airbnb plan. My parents have requested that we postpone any decisions about selling the vacation house. They've expressed a desire to continue using it occasionally, though only after my sisters accept their new reality, a process that could take years, if it happens at all. While I'm inclined to wash my hands of the whole situation, I can respect their wish to preserve this last thread of normalcy in our fractured family tapestry. The no-contact policy with my sisters and their husbands remains firmly in place. They persist in leaving voicemails from new numbers, pleading for meetings for our parents' sake to discuss the vacation house arrangements. Their inability to accept the finality of their exile would be almost comical if it weren't so exhausting. My wife and I have become experts at screening unknown calls, a skill we never anticipated needing in our own family drama. My parents inform me that my oldest sister and her husband are downsizing their lifestyle, surrendering their leased luxury vehicles and selling their recreational toys. For someone whose identity was so deeply entwined with material possessions, her husband even sports a truck manufacturer's logo tattoo. This forced humility must be particularly bitter medicine. Several well-meaning friends have suggested converting the vacation house into an Airbnb, an ironic proposition given recent events. However, the thought of legitimizing what my sisters did illegally feels wrong, and the stress it would cause my parents isn't worth any potential profit. Sometimes, peace of mind is worth more than additional income. As this chapter of our family saga draws to a close, I find myself reflecting on how a simple poolside dodge became the catalyst that exposed decades of festering family dynamics. The incident was merely the first domino in a long line of carefully balanced pieces, each falling in turn to reveal the true nature of our relationships. Perhaps these tensions were always there, simmering beneath the surface of our forced family gatherings, waiting for the right moment to boil over. Sometimes it takes a seemingly minor incident, a single step to the side, to expose the fault lines in our closest relationships and bring the entire facade crashing down. Looking back now, from the peaceful vantage point of our secured mountain retreat, I can't help but wonder if this outcome was inevitable. The pool incident didn't create these problems, it merely brought them into sharp focus, like sunlight suddenly streaming through murky water. In the end, perhaps this painful unraveling was necessary, a harsh but needed cleansing that allowed us to finally see the truth about our family's dynamics, even if that truth came at the cost of relationships we once thought unbreakable. Fifth update, 1.5 months later. Just when I thought our family drama had reached its crescendo, fate orchestrated an even more explosive movement in this discordant symphony. What unfolded over the past few days has left me simultaneously enraged and exhausted, my emotions oscillating between white-hot fury and bone-deep weariness. The relative peace we'd been enjoying shattered like a crystal vase on Friday after Thanksgiving. My brothers-in-law, apparently emboldened by holiday spirits or sheer desperation, executed what can only be described as a spectacularly ill-conceived assault on the vacation house. Armed with an angle grinder, because nothing says family reconciliation quite like power tools, they systematically violated every security measure I'd installed. The gate's chain fell victim to their industrial determination, the front door's lock set surrendered to their brute force, leaving ugly scars on the door's surface that matched the ugliness of their intentions. When the front entrance proved too resilient, they redirected their destructive energy to the utility floor door and an internal door, before inexplicably targeting the barn. Their amateur burglary attempt might have succeeded if not for David's vigilant monitoring of the security system. The cameras captured their entire performance, prompting our property manager to alert the local sheriff's department. The deputy's arrival coincided perfectly with my brothers-in-law's emergence from the house, creating a tableau of cosmic justice that would have been amusing if it weren't so tragic. Their attempts to bluff their way out of the situation proved about as effective as using a paper umbrella in a hurricane. The rural setting of our retreat added an extra layer of complexity to their predicament. Breaking and entering takes on a particularly serious tone in these parts, where such activities usually involve substance-addicted desperados ransacking vacant properties. My brothers-in-law's decision to verbally threaten me in front of law enforcement officers demonstrated a remarkable commitment to poor decision-making. David and the sheriff's office attempted to reach us, but my wife and I were deliberately disconnected from the world, our phones safely stowed away during a peaceful day with her parents. Our temporary communication blackout resulted in the full weight of the law descending upon my wayward in-laws, precisely the outcome I would have chosen had I been available. The aftermath unfolded like a particularly chaotic episode of a courtroom drama. My sisters, their maternal instincts apparently extending to their incarcerated husbands, launched a full-scale assault on every available phone line. They bombarded my parents with calls, attempted to penetrate my carefully maintained digital fortress, and desperately sought legal representation in an area where criminal defense attorney isn't exactly a growth industry, especially during a holiday weekend. My older sister's financial situation added an extra layer of complexity to their predicament, with zero cash reserves and credit cards stretched beyond their limits. Securing bail for both husbands would require my middle sister to shoulder the entire burden. When we finally checked our phones during the drive home from my in-laws, the cascade of notifications hit us like a digital avalanche. My wife, demonstrating her remarkable ability to maintain composure in chaos, methodically sorted through the messages, reading them aloud as I navigated the darkening highway. By the time we reached home, the full picture had emerged, and my initial holiday contentment had evaporated like morning dew in a desert. My first call was to David, whose detailed account of the day's events only served to fuel my simmering rage. The property damage assessment felt like salt in an already festering wound. The sheriff's department was my next stop. I made it crystal clear that this was no family misunderstanding, but a premeditated break-in deserving full prosecution. The thought of calling my parents that night was more than I could bear. My emotional reserves were as depleted as my sister's bank accounts. Sleep proved elusive that night, my mind replaying the day's events like a particularly disturbing movie on endless loop. Saturday afternoon found me finally reaching out to my parents, who had been reduced to emotional wreckage by my sister's relentless pressure campaign. They begged me to tell the authorities it was all a misunderstanding, to drop the charges and restore family peace. My flat refusal to consider any such action until I'd consulted with an attorney and received full compensation for the damage prompted fresh tears from my mother, a sound that felt like daggers in my heart, even as I knew I couldn't yield. Sixth update, 5 days later. The legal machinery ground forward with the inexorable pace of justice, each turn of its wheels bringing us closer to resolution. Tuesday morning found me in my attorney's office, reviewing the final agreement like a general inspecting battle plans. The document, with its carefully crafted clauses and precisely worded restrictions, included one final twist: they would need to cover my attorney's fees, approximately $3,000. Their attempts to negotiate this point met with the same success as their original break-in plan. My attorney's message was unequivocal: accept the terms in their entirety, or face the full spectrum of legal consequences, including civil action for their illicit rental income, property damages, emotional distress, and whatever other charges we could creatively construct. The signing ceremony, if one could dignify it with such a term, unfolded with all the warmth of a January blizzard. The participants maintained a frigid civility that barely masked their simmering resentments, though they managed to contain their hostilities long enough to apply ink to paper before beating a hasty retreat. Yesterday's pilgrimage to the vacation house to assess the damage firsthand nearly derailed our carefully constructed legal peace. The sight of their destructive handiwork sent my blood pressure soaring to dangerous heights. The senseless vandalism spoke volumes about their true nature, the physical manifestation of their entitled rage carved into our property. My initial reaction was to tear up the settlement agreement and dedicate my life to their legal destruction, regardless of the cost. Only an hour-long phone conversation with a close friend, who patiently absorbed my volcanic fury, prevented me from sabotaging the resolution we'd worked so hard to achieve. Seventh update, 5 days later. The legal machinery ground forward with the inexorable pace of justice, each turn of its wheels bringing us closer to resolution. Tuesday morning found me in my attorney's office, reviewing the final agreement like a general inspecting battle plans. The document, with its carefully crafted clauses and precisely worded restrictions, included one final twist: they would need to cover my attorney's fees, approximately $3,000. Their attempts to negotiate this point met with the same success as their original break-in plan. My attorney's message was unequivocal. Accept the terms in their entirety, or face the full spectrum of legal consequences, including civil action for their illicit rental income, property damages, emotional distress, and whatever other charges we could creatively construct. The signing ceremony, if one could dignify it with such a term, unfolded with all the warmth of a January blizzard. The participants maintained a frigid civility that barely masked their simmering resentments, though they managed to contain their hostilities long enough to apply ink to paper before beating a hasty retreat. Yesterday's pilgrimage to the vacation house to assess the damage firsthand nearly derailed our carefully constructed legal peace. The sight of their destructive handiwork sent my blood pressure soaring to dangerous heights. The senseless vandalism spoke volumes about their true nature, the physical manifestation of their entitled rage carved into our property. My initial reaction was to tear up the settlement agreement and dedicate my life to their legal destruction, regardless of the cost. Only an hour-long phone conversation with a close friend, who patiently absorbed my volcanic fury, prevented me from sabotaging the resolution we'd worked so hard to achieve. The afternoon's meeting with the assistant district attorney proved more productive than anticipated. Given my reluctance to pursue prosecution and the brothers-in-law's swift financial restitution, they agreed to reduce the charges to a Class 2 misdemeanor trespassing violation. The deal required guilty pleas and whatever fines the judge deemed appropriate. A relatively merciful outcome considering their ham-fisted attempt at breaking and entering. The prosecutor made it crystal clear that any resistance to the trespassing charge or future misconduct would result in the full weight of the law descending upon them like an avalanche. Their peaceful surrender during the arrest had worked in their favor. Any resistance would have sealed their fate more permanently than their angle grinder sealed theirs. My visit to the sheriff's office to express gratitude for their swift response felt inadequate compensation for their role in maintaining order in our family chaos. Though I couldn't personally thank the deputies involved, their professional handling of the situation deserved recognition. My attempted meeting with David, our property manager turned guardian angel, proved unsuccessful, but his role in this drama had proven invaluable. The settlement agreement reads like a carefully crafted divorce decree: no contact except through attorneys or mutually agreed upon intermediaries, immediate departure required if we accidentally occupy the same space, and a complete release of all past grievances. They get to keep their ill-gotten rental gains, my major concession, unless the IRS takes an interest in their undeclared income, in which case they're on their own. The document contains more legal provisions than a presidential treaty, but these form its backbone. 8th update, 3.5 months later. The wheels of karma continue their relentless turning, grinding exceedingly fine indeed. My oldest sister and brother-in-law have finally reached their financial Waterloo, filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a development that would be satisfying if it hadn't managed to drag my parents into their fiscal quagmire. The new year began with a particularly public humiliation when my brother-in-law's prized possession, his oversized, customized truck, the four-wheeled manifestation of his masculinity, was repossessed from his workplace parking lot, a spectacle that apparently provided his colleagues with weeks of water-cooler conversation. This automotive execution proved to be their breaking point. Their transportation situation has devolved into a tragicomedy. The entire family now shares a modest Kia borrowed from my parents, their bodies crammed into the compact space like a circus act gone wrong. Their financial autopsy reveals a staggering array of poor decisions: $125,000 in high-interest credit card debt, likely more, a house with negative equity, personal loans obtained under questionable pretenses, and a collection of recreational vehicles that would make a dealership envious, all financed to the hilt. The defaulted truck lease adds another layer to their debt lasagna, while their early escape from my sister's massive SUV lease required cash they didn't have. But the true gut punch in this financial tragedy lies in my parents' involvement. My folks, never financial wizards but generally responsible, have been reduced to emptying their emergency fund and liquidating their modest IRA, around $20,000, to keep my sister's sinking ship temporarily afloat. Their retirement safety net now exists only in memory, sacrificed to the altar of my sister's financial irresponsibility. Adding insult to injury, they continue bankrolling her groceries and car insurance, their own security eroding like a sandcastle at high tide. The story behind my parents' financial sacrifice reads like a psychological thriller. My sister, displaying manipulation skills worthy of a master strategist, spent weeks working on our mother's emotions, having failed to penetrate Dad's more pragmatic defenses. Her campaign of emotional warfare eventually succeeded in breaking down Mom's resistance, despite Dad's continued opposition. The specter of their grandchildren reduced to poverty, conjured by my sister's theatrical presentations, proved too powerful for Mom's maternal instincts to resist. The timing of their financial intervention proved darkly ironic. By helping my sister catch up on her mortgage payments, they've essentially ensured she can maintain possession of her house through the bankruptcy proceedings. My attempts to maintain diplomatic neutrality when my parents revealed this development nearly cracked under the weight of my suppressed opinions about my sister's manipulative tactics. The most concerning aspect of this latest development is the effective neutering of our no-contact agreement. With bankruptcy protection in place, the only real consequence for violating our agreement, potential financial liability for their vacation house rental scheme, evaporates like morning dew. The prospect of renewed contact attempts looms over us like storm clouds on the horizon. On a more positive note, I've managed 2 rejuvenating weekends at the mountain house since the year began, one shared with my wife, one in solitary contemplation. The property's transformation under winter's embrace, blanketed in pristine snow, offered a therapeutic counterpoint to our family's continuing drama. The recently upgraded internet service and David's reliable property management have transformed what was once a source of stress into a genuine retreat from the world's chaos. 9th update, 4 months later. As we approach the 1-year anniversary of the infamous pool incident, the family drama continues to unfold like a prestige television series that's jumped the shark. The latest episode centers around my mother's moment of clarity regarding her financial capitulation to my oldest sister. The realization that she'd been masterfully manipulated hit her with the force of a psychological thunderbolt, triggering an unprecedented display of maternal fury during a 3-way call with both sisters. The conversation, intended as a simple acknowledgement of the precarious financial position they'd placed their parents in, devolved into a masterclass in gaslighting as my sisters attempted to rewrite recent history. Mom, her patience finally exhausted, unleashed decades of pent-up frustration in a verbal tsunami that left both sisters scrambling to hang up their phones in retreat. The aftermath prompted my father to execute a decisive counterstrike. The morning after the explosive call, he reclaimed the car they'd loaned my sister, enlisting a neighbor's help to avoid direct confrontation. My sister's retaliatory phone assault, laden with vitriol, bounced harmlessly off Dad's newly fortified emotional walls, though the pain in his eyes revealed the cost of this necessary hardening of heart. But the most staggering revelation emerged like a long-buried family secret. For 17 years, my parents had been providing both sisters with monthly grocery allowances of up to $500 each. This financial umbilical cord, originally justified as compensation for my rent-free grad school living arrangements, had somehow transformed into a permanent entitlement. The discovery of this decades-long subsidy left me momentarily speechless. Who receives an allowance from their parents well into their 40s? The financial revelations continued to cascade like dominoes. My middle sister, perhaps sensing the shifting winds of family fortune, disclosed to our mother that the oldest sister's vacation house rental operation had been far more lucrative than initially suspected, generating over $6,000 monthly for nearly 3 years. The undeclared income, totaling somewhere between $88,000 and $99,000, adds a delicious layer of potential IRS complications to their already precarious financial situation. My oldest sister and her husband, meanwhile, remain trapped in their financial quagmire. Their bankruptcy case has morphed from Chapter 7 to Chapter 13, a development that my attorney suggests will force them to repay a significantly larger portion of their debts. My middle sister's marriage has become another casualty of our family's implosion, with her husband maintaining his physical and emotional distance. At my parents' request, I've begun the process of placing their house in a trust, with myself as trustee and armed with power of attorney.